Welcome. Thank you for coming to our program. We are talking about preparing students for AI practice. My name is Maren Dell, and I am the head of technical services at Berry Law School in Orlando. And I teach introduction to AI to some very interested law students. And I also teach law practice technology. I'd like to invite my co-presenters to introduce themselves.
Good morning. My name is Amy Emerson. I'm the director of the Law Library at Villanova University, Charles Witcher School of Law. I teach a couple of different courses there in law and technology, and you'll hear me talk about them today. Thanks.
Hi, I'm Chris Niedringhaus. I'm the director of the Law Library at Georgia State University, and I'm also the faculty director of our Legal Analytics and Innovation Initiative. I was teaching law practice technology. That program has kind of morphed, and I'll tell you a little bit more about that in a second.
Hi, I'm Jenny Wondrasik. I'm the director of the Law Library and a professor of legal research and writing at Capital University in Columbus, Ohio. And I have been in the legal tech world for a very long time. I'm one of those people, I think I'm over 10 Callies. And before I came to Capital, I was the director of legal educational technology for 6.5 years at UNT Dallas College of Law. I teach several courses, which we'll talk about next.
So what classes do our presenters teach? As I mentioned, I teach law practice technology. I've been really interested in legal tech since I started being a librarian back in 2005. It has morphed quite a bit, as we all know. And we have recently introduced a 1-credit, it's called a short course prior to the law school starting its regular semester. And that's where we focus on AI in particular and various forms of legal AI.
At Villanova, we have 3 primary places where technology is taught, artificial intelligence in particular. The first is in the first year legal research curriculum. Of course, we have to teach AI at this point in that particular course. And then the other courses are on the upper levels. I teach a course called Law Practice Technology. It's pretty commonly taught course, I think, at this stage in many universities, and looks at how technology is used in the practice of law. And that includes artificial intelligence, of course, a whole lot of it. Another course I teach is leveraging technology to promote access to justice. And that's a course in which we build tech for community partners in order to further their work in the law.
At Georgia State, first, it's not a competition, but I'm in the over 20 Callies category, which says more about my age than anything else. But I'm going to give you an idea of what we teach, because we have sort of a bigger program. Several years ago, Georgia State started the Legal Analytics and Innovation Initiative. Our business school has an analytics lab. We worked with them and set up that program, and it was teaching analytics, start a certificate program. And I started teaching a class, law practice technology, and another one of the librarians, many of you probably know Patrick Parsons, was teaching I always get the name of his class wrong, but it's like legal operations and something class. And it's essentially our certification class. We use NSLT. And the people who started LAII decided that they didn't enjoy administering a program. And I was asked if I would take it over. And I'm telling you all this because I want to give you an idea of the type of classes that we teach. So for AI, we are teaching it in research methods in the first year. There is still a law practice technology class, although it has turned into the introductory class for both of our technology certificates. We have a legal analytics certificate, and we also have a legal technology and innovation certificate, because we had a lot of students who wanted to learn more about technology, or sometimes they didn't want to, but they were smart enough to recognize that they needed to learn more about legal technology, but they didn't want to learn to code and do some of the heavier analytics type work. So we're teaching classes like sort of the introduction to legal technology, the legal operations. We have a legal analytics introduction and a legal analytics lab. The legal analytics lab is the capstone for that certificate. The capstone for our other certificate is legal process engineering, and that was developed by another one of our folks who many of you probably know, Michelle Hook-Dewey, who has firm experience and worked with Incubator out of Baker Hostetler. And that class is a capstone for our legal technology and innovation class. And it is an amazing experience for the students. They work with live clients, developing products or solutions for clients. So I've kind of veered away from, I'm talking about obviously more than just teaching AI, but I think it's interesting, hopefully to you all, to hear sort of the range of things that we're doing. And then obviously there's a bunch of other classes they can take to fill in the credits they need for the certificate. But that gives you an idea of what we're doing. And I'll be quiet now.
So we are not going even half as much into AI as Chris is, and I'm a little envious of her. But I have been teaching law practice technology for years. When I came to Capital, I brought the class with me. And so we are teaching law practice technology, although I will be giving that up to two of our firm tech trainers in Columbus. We actually have the head of technology training for Voorhees and for, what's the other one? Well, we have two of the big firms in Columbus where their tech trainers are taking on our law practice technology, including AI. We are teaching our 1Ls AI in legal research and writing, although, as you'll hear me later say, not right off the bat. We also have been doing one-offs for our upper level students to make sure that they are learning the technology as well. And the current plan is for me to be teaching AI in the law as a seminar in the spring of next year. And we are trying to finalize a project on AI and the law with a Serbian group of law professors to explore more across country.
So, you want to go first? Do you want me to? Sure, why don't you kick that off?
So, as I just said, we are not teaching our 1Ls AI right off the bat. I keep telling them that they need to be able to tell when the system goes rogue before they rely on it. So we are following the courts. There's an excellent Second Circuit opinion called Park v. Kim that says, no matter what you use or what you turn in, you have to verify that your cases exist. So thus you have to read the cases before you turn them in. So we're going on that premise and telling the students, first you have to learn how to verify before you can use the shortcut. So we're teaching AI at the end of the first semester of 1L year, as well as refreshers throughout the year for our upper levels.
So we are gonna AI is not gonna be the first thing we teach 1L first semester students, because yeah, bless their hearts, they're 1L students first semester and everything is new and overwhelming. But this year, so we're gonna teach, I don't think it's the last thing we're teaching, but it's towards the end of the semester. But I'm going to actually start talking to them about AI in the very first class, because I want them to understand that we know they have to understand how to use it, but we're going to wait a little bit, but I'm going to talk to them about it. And maybe even talk to them every class just in terms of giving them things to think about while they're learning other things before we get to the actual instruction in AI. I think that teaching them how to use AI is in part very similar to, if not the same thing as teaching them how to construct searches and to think about searching. And so I want to bring that into the conversation. I also had this moment, if any of you have the distinct pleasure of traveling through Atlanta Hartsfield International Airport, you will be familiar with the plane train, which is what we call the thing that moves you from place to place in the airport. And couple months ago, I got on the plane train and there was this huge advertisement that was basically like, we're AI and we're making sure your plane doesn't fall out of the sky. And I had a moment where I was like, oh my God, we're all going to die. So I took a picture of that and I thought, you know, this is, I think that's, I'm going to show them that in our first class, research methods, first week of law school, and have a discussion with them about, what do you think if I show you? I'm not going to tell them I was horrified, but ask them, what does this make you think? Does this make you feel safer? Does this make you feel a lot less safe? How do you think about AI? And start that thought process and have that conversation with them.
So I would add to that, as far as our first year writing program, we're really fortunate that we have a strong role in that program. We teach all of the research. We see the students both in the fall and the spring semesters of their 1L year, and that gives us a lot of opportunity to interact with them. And I think what I have to say is very similar in the sense that we don't introduce generative AI until later, but we do start talking about AI very early in the semester right away, because really all of our legal research platforms are driven by AI, whether or not it's generative AI, it's still driven by AI. It has been for a very long time. And so helping them understand how that plays a role in their research right up front is really important. And then we introduce it later in the semester. And the way we do that is by starting with we have a problem that will carry all the way through the semester so that they can become well acquainted with a legal topic. Because I think in order to evaluate the results of generative AI, you need to understand the content you're looking at, to know whether something's missing, to know whether it's accurate, all of those things. So we'll start with a problem that gets researched in a more traditional way, as we tend to think of more traditional legal research as we move through the semester. And then when we introduce generative AI, they can use that same problem and they're able to identify whether something's actually missing or whether it's correct. And so that's sort of how we approach that in that first year program.
So I actually have no idea whether we turn it on for the 1Ls yet. I only have experience with the upperclassmen, but I had the unique experience of last spring, or this past spring, to have Lexis turn their AI on the day my class started. So it was great timing. Everybody was like, what's happening? And we had a really robust discussion about, you know, the adoption periods and how this could change everything in a way that usual adoption takes a little bit longer. And now it's everywhere that everyone's going to be. And I actually I taught Introduction to AI to my law students. They are all evening students. I teach in the evening program. They tend to be working professionals. They have a little bit different perspective. So I mentioned your AI story in the plane. And they were like, oh yeah, here's all the things that AI has been doing all this time. And I was more horrified because my students were like spitting out all these things that I just never thought about it, but they were well aware. And I think I have a group that is really, really interested and well versed in AI, which I think is a really interesting perspective for them to come at the legal aspect of it. And for everyone, but I suppose our first years, like I said, I can't speak to that, but they are all in. Everyone's all in. I actually asked them how they feel about it, and I have very few students. I'd say 20% of the class maybe is more reserved or a little unsure. When we talk about regulation, they're like, but the rest of them are gangbusters. They are just very excited. So we're moving full speed ahead with it.
I wanted to say one other thing about timing of instruction. And this gets a little more complicated because it's, things we can't control. But I have been trying to encourage faculty to teach AI in classes that you think have nothing to do with AI, because the reality is our law students are going to use it when they go out into practice, most likely. I mean, everyone's going to be using it. And in order to teach something, right? Like I can do the soapbox talk about why we should teach legal research in every class and legal writing in every class. And that's why we should teach legal technology in every class. So as far as timing, I actually think we don't need to think about the one time we teach them AI. We need to think about every single class in the law school pretty much, and trying to encourage people to teach or talk about AI in legal in some way or the other. So that's my plug. Go back and proselytize to your faculty.
So as far as what we're doing at Berry, our material is basically the way I've structured it. I've tried to insert it into every part of my legal practice technology class, where we look at 3 legal tech software applications. We do a business application, we do a non-business application, and then we do an AI. And so by the end of the semester, we've done like 23 different AI platforms. And by the end of that, we haven't even scratched the surface. But also I think the students are getting a good view of all the different things that it can do. In introduction to AI, because we're only 1 credit hour, 3 days, we pack everything into that. And one of the things I hit really hard in there is the legal ethics. I try to tie that into everything that we do and make them understand that there's pitfalls and roadblocks ahead. We do a whole section about all the lawyers behaving badly. That's always their the most fun part, is to see how AI is being misused, and to throw up some warnings, and just really dig into the legislation aspect, because I started my law practice technology in the fall, this past fall. And at that time, when we started, the only thing that was really out there was the EU had model legislation that they were implementing. And just a year later, the legislative aspect has just exploded. And so that's been a really interesting talking point for the students, because you have students who are very conservative and not interested in regulation, and they don't like what's happening. And then you have a lot of students who are really interested in legislating and making sure that it's ethical and making sure that it's used ethically. And so that's a really big talking point for the students, that I feel like they're really gaining a lot of information that they need.
So yeah, looking at my upper level legal or law practice technology class, very similar in the sense of spending a lot of time on the ethics, the bias, those kind of concerns. A little less time on the legislation. We try really hard to spend a lot of time on the hands-on aspect. And so when it comes to AI, I try to start at the beginning. Right now, it feels quaint to actually like go back and think about like the basics, right? Like the terminology, like we're so caught up in the generative AI and this big picture. But I think it's really important to just go back and start with, do they even understand what the difference is between something like what is machine learning versus artificial intelligence? What is the difference when you use those kind of terms? And how do those things happen? How is that done? And I find that using tools, David Colarusso mentioned, I think, Word2Vec today, using Word2Biz, things like that are really fun for them. And it starts to create an environment where they can kind of see exactly how does this all come together? How do these words relate to one another? Teachable machine, it's just another silly tool. It's something kids use, but it's something where they get to train it a little bit, and they start to see, okay, if I do need to put more data into this to get a better result out on the other side. So really incorporating the hands-on exercises, starting at the very beginning and not assuming that anyone's already over here in terms of their understanding, I think it's really important.
So my material depends on who I'm teaching. For the 1Ls, we are focusing mostly on legal research and some drafting tools. We really want to make sure they understand how it fits in, especially now that we have access to Lexis AI. I will say, if you're going to teach practical law AI, show them that before you show them Lexis, because otherwise they get really disappointed. So they're like, wait, but Lexis does all this fun stuff. I'm like, it's coming. In fact, I just got an email today that co-counsel is being integrated into pretty much everything Westlaw. Whether or not the academics will get it, I don't know, but it's coming. They will probably turn it on mid-semester just to mess with us a little. I think that's their pushback. They're like, we're just going to see what the academics do. So we also, though, we talk about some of the limitations of the systems, so that they understand that you need to ask different questions of different systems. So for instance, we actually look at some of the Lexis limitations. Like originally when we were teaching this, there were only 5 follow-up questions you could ask. Now there are 10. So they have to think through everything before they ask their questions. They also need to know what it's trained on. How many of you have seen the Stanford AI study? So Stanford has been looking at hallucinations for legal research tools, a very limited set of tools. They apparently asked West for access to precision AI. West said no, until the preliminary results came out, and they're like, wait, that you can't compare practical law AI to Lexis AI. Then they gave them access. But one of the problems I have with this study is they're asking questions without considering what that AI system is trained on. So practical law AI is trained on practical law materials. It's not trained on the full universe of primary law and secondary law. So that's one of the things we talk to the students about, is that before you start asking questions, know what's in there. Lexis, when they first started, had a limited pool, and they've slowly been adding. So that's a good lesson for the students, that they need to be checking to see what it's currently trained on. Because, the results of that study say 14% hallucination for Lexis, I think it is, and 17% for West. But is it really 14 and 17%, or did they ask questions that of course it's not going to be able to answer? For instance, if you ask a family law question of practical law AI, it's going to stutter because it doesn't have family law materials in there. So these are things that we teach the students to think about. I also tell them, number 1 skill for especially the commercial AIs is reading the terms of service. And we talk about looking at the inputs and the outputs and who owns what and what gets done with everything. And we talk about the articles that came out where the big firms had signed contracts with OpenAI and then realized their data was being saved for 30 days to run it through abuse detection to make sure, they're not creating Nazi propaganda, because that's what all big firms do. But that means that their data is out there. And if they put in anything client related, that means their client data is being saved by someone else for 30 days, and they're outsourcing review for abuse. That could potentially be an issue for big firms. So we talk about those kinds of limitations and what they need to look for. I actually just put up a slide for a couple students, or not a couple students, but at a Columbus Bar Association event where I had the students look at the output terms from OpenAI that say, hey, you own this. We give up all rights to it. And then the very next paragraph says, by the way, the output may not be unique to you. We may have given this to someone else. And I'm like, there seems to be some discrepancy between those two paragraphs. And so we talked to the students about that. So these kinds of lessons, in addition to here's how to draft a prompt, are important. So I talked to my 1Ls about that. I talked to my upper level students. My upper level students, we delve into even more systems. So we're talking about LawDroid. If you guys have not seen LawDroid's Copilot, which they use the name before Microsoft, they give free academic accounts. It's an AI system that sits on top of the Harvard Free Law Project. And it does more. It's more like ChatGPT than Lexis and Westar. So for instance, you can even get it to create images for you. But we talk about other systems beyond just the few that we talk about in 1L. And we talk about how else it can be used besides legal drafting and legal research. There's so much more it can be used for. So we really expand on that, as well as talking about things like AI detectors, which are notoriously inaccurate. I do not say avoid them altogether. What I say is you have to use human knowledge. So consider it just a red flag. So you have to go review it, just like you have to review the flags in Lexis and West. That seems to resonate with my faculty. But we talk about all these different things in addition to just, here's what to put in that box. And it's things that we talk about with our research systems as well. Are you looking for secondary sources? What kinds of secondary sources? Make sure that's in your search before you search. Things like that. So I have been talking long enough.
I'll just say I agree with all of that. I'm really I always talk about ethics when I teach law practice technology. I always have a ethics sidebar for every topic that we're doing. So I think that's an important conversation. To sort of wrap up what people have been saying, I actually think this conversation, you cannot tell, but these are rose-colored glasses. I'm hoping, because these conversations are things that we've been talking about a long time when we talk about teaching research, teaching them to think about what are you trying to find and what's the best database? What's the best way to approach creating a search? If you only have 10 follow-up questions, think before you start typing, which is a very difficult skill. And so I put a lot of emphasis on tying together how it's similar and how they need to be thinking about a lot of these things in both the legal research and the AI context, not just one or the other.
So one of my favorite parts of this is watching the students' light bulbs go on when they realize that the output, it can be a hot mess. I have them do an introduction to the AI. I deliberately make them stick with one prompt as we go through multiple hands-on exercises in different platforms. And their final project, which they present to the class, is they have to use a legal AI and they have to use a non-legal AI, and they have to put the exact same prompt in, and then they have to evaluate the output. And one of the things I require of them is I usually have pretty big classes for this, so it's kind of hard to spread out the legal AI, but I make them spread out the non-legal AI. And my students have been doing, There's AI in Snapchat, so you can have Snapchat do the answers. Grammarly, one of them used Grammarly. And then they a lot use the more traditional non-legal AI, but that's always a really interesting experience for everyone because in the first place, using all those non-legal AIs is an eye-opener as to what you get asking it a legal question. And the second is that when you have 23 people putting in the prompts for legal AI, and most of them use Lexis AI, we can see that the results are not exactly what Lexis promises. The outputs are not, the form is not. And so while Lexis AI is a good product that we can trust for the most part, seeing that consistently non-standard output is very interesting as an exercise. And in law practice technology, I make them do a full legal stack for a law firm, and they have to tell me what their ideas are about AI and if they're going to integrate it and what they're going to use. So those are the two main focuses of my classes. I know in the upper level advanced legal research classes, they are also doing exercises where they're doing a lot of very real world client focused stuff.
So for exercises with my 1Ls, I have a prompt writing worksheet, one for legal AIs and one for non-legal AIs. If you want to see it, it's on AI-librarians.com. Just search for my name. And I treat it basically like Chris said, like a research plan, because we want them to think before they put things in the box. Garbage in, garbage out applies to AI just as much as it does to a traditional research string. So we talk about all of the limitations and then we work through this research plan. And let me tell you, I still have students who are like, I'm just going to take that entire prompt you gave me and throw it into the research box. And then we talk to them about how it can be better results if they have stopped and thought it through and work to revise things to make it more specific to the AI that they're using. Especially when, again, I like to use family law just because they stop and think and they're like, oh, wait, I can't use that in practical law. So it gets them to start thinking through those limitations, even though we've had that conversation. Until they see it in action, they aren't really going to believe me. So we work through things like that. The other example that I really like is Ohio recreational user law. So this is a special type of land entrant in Ohio. The very first time I put it into ChatGPT, it gave me citations to the Ohio Supreme Court's rules on keeping documentation in the courtroom while the case is ongoing. Obviously not the right law. And so usually my students have already done a session where they had to research this the old-fashioned way. And then they get to something like ChatGPT's output and they're like, that's not right. I'm like, this is why you need to pick the right system with the right law. It's also a very nuanced law, so it allows you to really see how well the AIs do with the nuances. It's getting better all the time, but those nuances are different from Ohio as they are to some other states that have this type of land entrance, so you can see where it's pulling from. I will say with Lexis, one thing that I had to show my students with this is it's going to do really well because it's only pulling Ohio when you ask it to pull Ohio. But for items where you want Ohio and related federal, you won't get the federal because Lexis can't handle multiple jurisdictions right now. So then we have to redo our search with federal law and we get all the states. So it's a little bit of an interesting exercise to walk them through. For my upper level students, as I said, we go beyond just research. We talk about what I call the sandwich method. which I actually think I stole from Ivy Gray, where you get it to help you organize and brainstorm, you do the lawyering, and then you revise and polish with the AI. And so we talk about that. They write a whole slew of different things. So they do social media posts, they do thank you letters, all kinds of different things that we look at so they can see how it works beyond just here's a research and drafting problem.
So I'll just put a plug in for Jenny's prompt writing worksheets. They're definitely worth going and looking them up. The other thing I was going to say is, this is sort of adapted from, if any of you are familiar with Susan Nevelow-Mart's work, on comparing Lexis and Westlaw searches and whether they duplicate coverage, whether your results are the same or not. She's done a couple articles on that, and I do an exercise in legal research where they do the same or equivalent search in Lexis, Westlaw, and Google, and they compare the cases that come back and are always shocked to see that there's a lot more variation than they expect there to be. They expect to get the same results, right, from each product. Doing a similar thing with AI, having them do, much like Jane was talking about, having them do the same prompt and the everybody has been talking about having them do the same sort of prompt in different systems so that they can see that what comes back varies and sometimes varies greatly is really eye-opening to them in much the same way that it is in just a pure legal research sense. The students are convinced, and probably a lot of attorneys, that they're going to get the same thing out of Lexis and Westlaw. And it's helpful, I think, to show them that they aren't, and that the same thing is true for these AI systems. So that's an exercise that I like to use.
So an exercise that I found really useful and enlightening is in my class called Leveraging Technology. We build tools for community partners. And the class requires the students to, first of all, learn the area of law that they're building the tool about, of course. And then from there, they have to convey the law in plain language. And that's a real challenge, right? You're sort of trying to translate legalese into something. My understanding is that most Americans read on about a 5th grade level. So you're trying to translate it into that level, but still keep it accurate, right? And still convey what the law actually says. And that is really challenging and really difficult. In this last semester, we actually, the problem was a social security disability issue, just crazy amounts of information to work with, and then trying to put that into terms that make sense for the average person is really challenging. So what I found is that your average free Gen AI product does really well with something like that. And it's a lot of fun for the students to just go out, pick a tool, use that to translate the law, so to speak, into your basic plain language. And then, of course, like we've said with all of these, you still have to work with it, right? You still have to make sure it's accurate. You still have to make sure that the law is being, first of all, fully conveyed. It's all still there. It didn't do away with the law. And then that it still says what it's supposed to say, and convey the meaning of it and keep that meaning. This is a lot of fun. It gets them to learn about those tools and how they work and what's behind them and what they do and don't contain and so forth. And then, you know, how to work with the results of the tool after the tool is generated a response. And it's not just fun, but I felt really vindicated. I think it was like last week, there was an 11th Circuit judge that came out who said he had used, you know, a ChatGPT or something in in coming to a conclusion in an insurance law case about whether a trampoline constituted landscaping. And he really wanted to get to the plain language and understand, like, what are we really looking at here? And he was very pleased with the results. He actually went so far in his concurrence, I think, to praise the LLM that he'd used. And it was interesting to see that. I was like, this is actually something that works really well for.
I was just going to follow up as everyone was talking. I was just reminded of the recent introduction to AI class where everyone was presenting their final projects, and we go over prompt engineering, but it's a pass-fail class, so I don't monitor them too much. And so when they get up there and they have to show everyone their prompts, we have some students who are like, here's my little prompt that I kind of expanded. And then here's my, another student will be like, they have a prompt that's like 8 paragraphs long. And the difference in output is stark. And I think more than me saying it, because they don't want to hear what I'm saying, they see each other's work, and they can absolutely see the difference in quality, the difference in what you get back and it is very much garbage in, garbage out. And that is more of a lesson, I think, to them than if I just stand up there and say it. So that's something that I always find amusing.
I do think it's important that we give them use cases where it works really well. We tend to talk a lot about how it doesn't work well because we want to caution them about, not getting themselves into trouble, not committing malpractice. But I also think it's important that we talk about, even if they're not legal examples. For example, I use, I'm going to use the airplane, the plane train thing about our AI is keeping your plane safe, which scares me. But the example that I've always used to sort of be like, I'm not just here slamming AI. There are things that it's really good at. For a long time, one example I use is for a number of years. So I go to Emory because I live in Atlanta for healthcare. And if you get an annual mammogram, you get a letter back from Emory that says, these results were assisted in reading using, they don't call it artificial intelligence, but that's what they're saying, right? So it's also reviewed by a doctor, and the research shows that is an incredibly excellent use of this technology, is to help review mammograms to screen for breast cancer. And there's legal examples of this too, but I just really want to emphasize, I think it's really important that we don't just tell them all the ways it can go wrong, but also tell them how it can go right. Because they need to learn how to use it. They just need to learn how to use it responsibly.
I agree, especially with that last sentiment. I also cover a lot of ethics, but one of the things that I wanted to say based on actually what Amy said, one of the other exercises that I do is helping them understand how language can shift between models. So when I'm teaching them research, one of the questions I really like to walk them through is a hypothetical based on a minor purchasing a car, because we all know contracts are voidable by minors unless it's for a necessity. So they get to that first statement and they're like, oh, it's voidable. And then I'm like, well, what if it's to get to the job that supports their family? And they're like, oh, so that's the lesson on keep reading. The other lesson that I really like from that hypothetical is the ALR and AMGR still use traditional legal language for minors. So in their minds, it's like kids, children, youth. And I'm like, what about infants? And they're like, babies can't drive. I'm like, okay, let's go look up the definition of infant in Black's Law. And it's anyone under the age of majority. And so if you're looking in the legal AIs, most of them, since they're trained on the legal resources, will have somewhat of an understanding that if you're using the word infants, you don't mean the baby in arms, you mean someone under the age of majority, which is usually 18, although some states are odd and have 19 or 21. So if you put the same language into ChatGPT, because of its training material, it's focusing on the infants in arms, not anyone under 18. And so that's an amazing experience for them to learn about, is how language use matters. So it's almost a different dialect, which is part of my lesson, because I'm like, you know, law, it's its own language. So you're learning a new language. And so they can see how the patterns change. It also comes up when I talk to them about translation, because the AI systems are amazing at translation, but you can't use it in a court of law because it's not an official legal translation, because words have specific meanings. And just like we have legalese in English, there's legalese in every other language. So, but the translation feature is amazing. I love it. It helps me find things all the time. It's actually, I have a lesson plan for it to teach me Serbian. So, so it's great at those things. And I love telling people about it with a few caveats. So, anything else we want to talk about for exercises? I think we are on to questions. What do you guys want to know about? Anyone? Debbie? Yes. There are a group of librarians, and I think I know one in the room, who are looking at the different study or the different AIs as well and running a study. Yes. It's still pretty basic, but everything's being well defined. It's still pretty basic out. It's you all, some of you get to cover, some of you get all one else, but you get everybody.
Oh, hello. Hi. So I asked about, I mentioned that family law is not in practical law and how excited I am that people noticed that, and that there was no librarians in the Stanford study, but some of us librarians are working on a benchmarking project, and you can look at the AI law librarians blog to find out more about that. But then there's my question, which is about, some of you get to teach all students some of the time, some of you get to reach all of the 1Ls, but there's more to tell them. How are you reaching out to those students who are not in front of you, or how are you reaching out to the students who are not in front of you about things that they need to know about that you can't cover in class?
It still doesn't guarantee that we talk to every student, but at Georgia State, the library has a sort of like a brown bag lunch/dinner program called the Alert, which actually stands for something. We worked really hard to create a name that, yeah, I can never remember. But it's our Alert program, and they, it's a lot of legal research topics that they can do sort of a 45-minute session on to learn more. And we've included AI and technology in those. But again, it's not the only time we get to teach all the students is in legal research. And so hopefully we just make it interesting enough that enough other people show up in their upper level classes.
We're the same. The only mandatory class is the 1L legal research. We did do a spring research session on AI for the 1Ls this year as well. And we do a boot camp that we invite all of the students to before they go out to their summer jobs, where we talked about AI. Some of our students came to that, and then we also are part of the Columbus Bar Association Summer Associate Training. So anyone who's working as a summer associate in Columbus is invited, including our students. So we try to reach them there as well. Rebecca Forden and I did a session this year on AI.
Actually, another thing that you might do is if you have student groups that would be interested in this, we have a legal analytics student organization. We also have a really active cybersecurity student org. And there's one other I'm forgetting that we've worked with, but we've worked with them to offer programs. And it gets a really good draw because they offer free food. So, that's always a draw.
So we don't have any kind of certificate program or concentration at our school that's focused on technology. So what we've done that I'm pretty pleased with, I think it works quite well, is our school has a really strong professional development program, and it has for a while. And now with the professional identity requirements and so forth, this has been a way for us to sort of come in the back door to talk about technology with students. And so we're able to reach every student this way through that program, talk about technology. And what's nice is we capture the 1Ls, at least for research in the first year, but then we get to see the 2Ls and we get to see them again as their 3Ls in through this professional development program. And that's where we talk about technology, at least in a couple of circumstances throughout the year in that program. And I would also second the idea of either working through student groups or forming a new student group that focuses on this topic, and they can help get the word out.
Yeah, these are great ideas, and I think we're just playing catch up. And I absolutely love the idea of getting student groups engaged and putting together programs for them. So I'm going to be bringing that back.
Looks like we have a question right here, and then we'll come back. You have the mic. Go for it. Never mind. Microphone.
Okay. So now that you've taught your students how to use AI responsibly, how receptive have your faculties been to allowing students to use AI in writing papers or taking exams or writing law review notes?
It depends on the faculty member. So we are not forcing faculty to do this because it's just going to backfire and bite us. Our current policy is that it falls under the unauthorized assistance. So a professor can allow you to use it, which some do. A professor can not allow you, which means it's an honor code violation. Or if the professor is silent, we say, please default to the don't use it so you don't fall into that. I don't think we will ever let them use it on exams if for no other reason than we use ExamSoft and we're not opening it up to AI. We also have had our faculty question us because of Grammarly, because they were fine with the traditional Grammarly. And then I told them that it now has a generative AI system called Grammarly Go. And now they're a little freaked out about that. So again, it depends on the faculty member, but I think half of the battle is educating the faculty and not just the students on what to do with it. I get more questions though about detecting AI than I do about using AI.
Yeah, we're being recorded, so I'm not gonna tell you all the good stories I have. But I will, it's a spectrum, and I do think that we need to educate the faculty, and we've done some we have a lot of faculty brown bags and things like that. We've done sessions there, and I've talked to several of our faculty. I was so delighted because I got a phone call from a faculty member who wanted to incorporate using some of the new AI tools in the research systems into an assignment that they were doing in class. And that to me, like I've already said, I think it needs to be taught across the curriculum, but it's a process. I mean, it's just like anything else. Some of them, somebody else has to put their syllabus on the online system because they can't even do it themselves to So it's a full range of experience and even desire to learn it. But yeah, I'm gonna stop. You guys are tired of hearing me say this. It has to be taught across the curriculum for students to really understand how important it is. So.
Okay, quickly, because I think I'm probably too much. You focused a lot on the research side. I'm wondering if you can share a little bit more on the drafting capacities, because for me, part of the challenge is I want to prepare my students for practice. I see no problem with them being efficient in their practice by using the drafting tools. When I played around with it, it generated a pretty good memo and a pretty good motion. But at the same time, I need my students to actually know how to do IRAC or CREAC. And when they're taking the bar exam, they will not have any of those tools. So if you have any suggestions on how to balance that or bring that into the class.
So I've taught legal writing in addition to teaching legal research. And again, I go back to that sandwich method. I'm like, guys, it's like Sheldon Cooper in an HR office, all the knowledge, none of the context. So you still need to do the lawyering. So we talk about that, but we also talk about how they can use it to help them draft without necessarily taking and letting it do the lawyering work. But the memos, I've found that they're too short and they give a high overview. They don't really go into the nuances. And I tell them it's a great place to start, but you need to develop it and you need to dig in and things like that. One of our writing professors also will draft something using the AIs and take it to the students and let them critique it to help make that point that they need to do a little bit more in-depth analysis and really develop it more, unless they're looking for just that really high level overview. So that's how we're working it into the curriculum. But we do have one faculty member who basically compares what it drafts for contracts with the template form books that you can get out of the system as well. And she loves that kind of writing exercise.
So, one of our faculty, it was actually a drafting exercise that they were trying to do. And our difference of opinion came because the faculty members' intent was, I'm going to have them use AI to draft this, and then they'll learn how bad AI is and they won't want to use it again. And I was like, that is not the lesson they are going to learn from this exercise. And I think that's a really important conversation, because the thing that generative AI can help them with that maybe isn't ideal, but also still helpful, is the blank page problem, right? So the exercise that this faculty member set up was, my concern was that it was going to help them cross that hurdle of where do I start? And so they weren't going to get, if his intended lesson was this produced a really bad result, and so you should just do it in the traditional way, that wasn't the message they were going to get from it. And so I think it's just, I actually think that could be a very good way to use it, is to help them get over the blank page problem, but still be able to analyze it and figure out where it had gone awry, and or show them how to use prompt engineering to make that better.
I was just going to say the final lesson that we get in my introduction to AI class, and the students pretty much agree on, is the content from Lexis AI, and then run it through a regular AI for the form, because the form is never that great. And the final lesson is that there is no one silver bullet for AI. You have to use a bunch of different things, and then you have to use your brain.
We have one more question from an attendee online, and since they can't talk to you in the hallway, I'll shoot it out to you real quick. Has anyone used the analogy of managing and delegating to junior attorneys or paralegals to illustrate the dynamic between the lawyer and AI for purposes of drafting? Having supervised many team members in real life with drafting projects, I see big parallels and use that to prompt and supervise the AI for non-law drafting projects.
Yes, that's something that I tell them right away. Is my mic still on?
I actually will tell anyone and everyone I meet that I think that AI falls under 503 in the model rules, which is supervision of a non-attorney. You need to treat it like your summer associate, like your paralegal, and you have to oversee it. You can't just give it blind trust or let it run amok. Yeah. So just like your associates.
Yeah. So I don't know if I'm making this up. I feel like there's a memory of the ABA rule used to say supervision of assistants, ANTS, and it was changed to assistants, ANCE.
You aren't making.
I'm not making that up. Okay, I think that happened a few years ago, and that's something concrete you can point to say this captures AI.
I have a slide of that change in the ABA rule, but I also use that example that, in my opinion, they're supervising it just like a paralegal or someone else. So
I think we are at time. Thank you all for coming and for your questions, and we'll hang around if you have any more.